If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Before we begin, do you have a theory about this case or a story of your own? Share it with me at nightwatchfiles@gmail.com. Your insights might be featured in a future episode. And be sure to stick around until the end, where I'll read a couple regarding the last episode. Maybe yours is one of them. Let's unravel this together. Warning: this episode contains graphic descriptions of violence. Listener discretion is advised. The morning of June 20th, 1994 began with a frantic call to the emergency number at 7:09 a.m. The voice on the other end, strained and panicked. "They're all dead. They're all dead." It was David Bain, 22 years old, calling from his family home in Dunedin, New Zealand. What the dispatcher couldn't yet know was that this single sentence would ignite one of the most controversial and chilling murder cases in the nation's history. Within minutes, police officers arrived at 65 Every Street in Andersons Bay. The house was described as old and semi-derelict. As the officers approached the scene, an ambulance was already waiting outside. The first body they encountered was that of Robin Bain, 58, lying partly on his side in a room opposite David's bedroom. A rifle with a silencer and telescopic sight lay on the carpeted floor nearby. Moving through the house, illuminated by the beams of their flashlights, the officers found Leniette Bain, 18, under a duvet on a bed. Further inside, past shelves laden with preserves, lay Arwa Bain, 19, on her back on the floor, her legs tucked beneath her as if she had knelt and fallen backward. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, Margaret Bain, 50, was discovered on a waterbed with a bullet wound below her left eyebrow. Finally, the youngest, Stephen Bain, 14, was found in his room. Throughout the house, a sense of squalor and mess prevailed, with the family's belongings scattered in disarray. In the lounge, the communal computer displayed a chilling message. "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." 5 members of the Bain family were dead, all from gunshot wounds. The eldest son, David, stood as the sole survivor. Robin Irving Bain and Margaret Arwa Cullen married in 1969, bringing together 2 individuals from Presbyterian backgrounds with musical talents. Robin, born in Taranaki in 1936, had trained as a teacher and worked in Maori schools, while Margaret, born in Roxburgh in 1944, was a kindergarten teacher-trainer in Dunedin, where she first met Robin through a youth group. Despite their seemingly compatible background, psychologist Richard Matches noted their significant personality differences, even recalling Margaret's disturbing statement that she would shoot Robin if she could. After marrying, they settled near Every Street and welcomed their first son, David, who was born prematurely in 1972. In 1974, with Margaret pregnant with Arwa, the family moved to Papua New Guinea for church work, having purchased 65 Every Street just before their departure. They were initially stationed in Galim, on the island of New Britain, where Robin served as a deputy principal, and Margaret immersed herself in local culture. Arwa was born in 1974, followed by Leniette in 1976, and expats around them noted the couple's disorganized and unsanitary lifestyle. Robin's hopes of becoming a principal remained unfulfilled, and by 1979, the Bains had moved to Port Moresby, where Robin lectured at Papua New Guinean Service College. Their domestic life continued to be chaotic, with Stephen born in 1980. While Margaret was known for being friendly and interested in natural healing, her poor housework led to social isolation. Fellow teacher Robin Atkinson found Margaret calm and Robin wise, but noted Margaret's frequent illness. Despite their outward appearance of a loving unit, the family was internally fragmented, with Margaret homeschooling the children with mixed results. They would return to New Zealand every 3 years, traveling in their Commer van, during which time unusual incidents would occur, such as David kicking open a bathroom door Laniet had locked. In 1981, Margaret's New Zealand family discovered that 9-year-old David could barely read or write, though Margaret firmly believed that life experiences were more important than formal education. Upon returning to Papua New Guinea, the children started school, with David experiencing bullying and eventually being withdrawn from high school. The family remained active in expat musical and dramatic circles, with Robin respected for his musical abilities and community involvement, though Margaret sometimes resented that his career seemed to overshadow her own. Psychologist David Bain, who counseled the family in 1987, found Margaret domineering and unusually focused on her sex life with Robin. Margaret also claimed abuse by her father, while Bain observed that David was guarded but respectful of Robin, primarily wanting to escape the chaotic home environment. Robin appeared emotionally subdued due to Margaret's dominance. A civil engineer who knew them in Gollum noticed their continued chaotic life in Port Moresby, with Robin mentioning that Margaret had gone to another world. Despite their family stresses, they traveled widely. In 1986, they bought property in Bundaberg, Australia, planning a horticultural business, but by 1987, they were considering returning to New Zealand due to rising crime and concerns about their children's secondary schooling. Robin also explored potential work with the UN. They saw returning to their Dunedin house as an opportunity to build Robin's superannuation and restart their lives. Upon returning to New Zealand, the Bain family first reconnected with friends and relatives, traveling in their old Commer van. Arriving in Dunedin, they were shocked by the dilapidated state of their Every Street house, which had suffered 15 years of neglect and unkind tenants. Weeks of hard work were required to make the house livable. The transition from their respected expatriate life in Port Moresby, where Robin had been well paid and respected, to their new reality in Dunedin was extraordinarily challenging. David, Laniet, and Stephen struggled at school, while Robin was forced to work as a relief teacher with periods of unemployment. Margaret's frustration grew palpable. She felt bitter and believed the Presbyterian Church owed them more support, her hopes for a comfortable return completely shattered. Feeling increasingly lonely, she began demanding more attention from Robin. Shortly after their return, she attempted to involve friends in a voodoo-like sect, and by early 1990, she had moved into a caravan in the garden, viewing it as a sacred space for dream interpretation. And 6 months later, Robin joined her in the caravan while Margaret returned to the house. In August 1990, he became the relieving principal of Taieri Beach Primary School, which was an hour's drive from every street. He developed a routine of commuting, returning for choir practice with David, mostly using the Commer van, but occasionally riding an old motorbike. Despite living in the caravan, he continued to eat with the family, with Margaret providing meals for his time away. At Taieri Beach, he would sleep in the van on school grounds, using school facilities, and complaints about the van led him to park it roadside at night. This arrangement provided multiple benefits. It gave Robin distance from marital tensions, allowed Margaret more control at home, and helped them save money. Robin's salary went into a joint account, with Margaret managing cash withdrawals and their joint credit card. They were meticulous about clearing the credit card bill. While Robin became integral to the Taieri Beach community, he started applying for other jobs in 1991. Margaret's inner world became increasingly complex. She maintained an irregular diary that mixed everyday events with occultish thoughts, describing Robin as the son of Belial and constantly feeling the presence of Bel, whom she tried to clear from Robin. Paul Morris, a religious studies head who read her diaries, noted her intense focus on demons and felt the family environment was toxic. Margaret appeared increasingly detached, seemingly seeing an alien force in her household. Neighbors Wayne and Billy Marsh had their own observations, finding Robin gentle and Margaret flaky and opinionated. While Margaret had been a skilled potter in Papua New Guinea, she didn't pursue that craft in Dunedin, instead focusing on gardening, movies, music, bottling, exploring her dreams, reading, knitting, and helping David with his theater roles. When alone, she would often ignore Robin, her growing resentment fueling a sense of grievance. Barbara Short, a friend from New Britain, had observed Margaret's evolving spiritual interests as early as 1987, noting her embrace of reincarnation and channeling. Margaret would make extraordinary claims, suggesting connections to Egyptian emperors and Winston Churchill. In 1991, when Short visited the Bains, she witnessed arguments and Margaret's clear desire to end the marriage, a desire Robin consistently resisted. Short felt particularly sorry for the children, who suffered under Margaret's relentless bossiness. Margaret began developing plans for a new house, believing God had personally instructed her to create the design. David became heavily involved in planning this proposed retreat, while Robin grew increasingly worried about the expense and felt systematically excluded from the planning process. Despite his marginalization, Robin remained the family's sole financial provider. The family lived frugally, though they possessed considerable assets. Margaret's belief system had evolved to the point where she was convinced God would provide if Robin were to leave. Margaret's sisters remained largely unaware of the family's deep-seated marital problems. Her sister Jan never heard any negativity from Margaret about Robin. During a visit, Margaret's sister Val and her husband noticed a telling dynamic. The children would look to Margaret for approval before even approaching Robin. Margaret had taken to describing Robin as essentially a ghost within their home. Their friend Robin Atkinson visited in 1994 and found the situation deeply concerning. Margaret complained about Lanyette leaving home, while Robin looked remarkably gaunt. Margaret candidly shared that things were not good and expressed no desire to return to teaching. Housework had deteriorated to an alarming state. Her 1993 diaries revealed a deeply unhappy woman consumed by anger towards her family. Her attitude towards Robin had transformed dramatically over time, from attempting to convert him to actively wanting him to leave, and ultimately surrendering the matter to divine intervention. By mid-1993, Margaret was convinced Robin's departure was imminent and was subsequently shocked when it didn't materialize. Meanwhile, the children were experiencing their own complex journeys. David, who had started at Bayfield High School in 1989, initially faced teasing but eventually found a circle of friends. He played Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music and went to the school ball with Caroline White, though his intense behavior ultimately scared her away. Mark Buckley, who had befriended David out of sympathy, recalled disturbing conversations. David would discuss rape fantasies involving a jogger, even planning to use his paper round as an alibi. Another friend corroborated these unsettling discussions.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
David's university experience proved challenging. After enrolling at the University of Otago in 1991, he met Barbara Chisholm through Rovers. She found him introverted and perceived the family as strange, believing David was controlled by Margaret and likening him to a bomb waiting to explode. Bronwyn Wood, who encountered David while fruit picking, observed him as naive about mainstream life and heavily influenced by religion and family. He claimed guidance from an inner voice. After failing his first university year, David transitioned to the unemployment benefit and continued his paper round. His academic failure disappointed his family, who had harbored hopes he would become a veterinarian. Despite this setback, David did achieve some personal milestones. He completed an Outward Bound course in 1992, which made his father proud. David consistently sided with Margaret during her marital conflicts with Robin, supporting her house plans and becoming increasingly involved in performing arts. His musical pursuits led him to Opera Alive in 1992, where he took singing lessons and secured minor roles. Pharmacist Patricia Napier was impressed by his talent and helpfulness. Fellow singer Lindsay Robertson praised his voice as a beautiful, nice, rich, deep tenor. However, others found him socially awkward, and he became the target of practical jokes, earning nicknames like DCB and Dumbo. A particularly memorable incident occurred while David was rehearsing for Godspell in 1993, when he collapsed on stage, muttering about black hands. A nurse present believed he was fabricating the episode. Some Opera Live members began avoiding him due to his social awkwardness. His 21st birthday party, organized by Robin at Bayfield High School, was notably formal and childlike. In 1990, David obtained a firearms license and eventually purchased a .22 rifle with a telescopic sight in 1993, also acquiring a silencer. He primarily used the weapon for hunting rabbits and possums. Arwa's trajectory contrasted sharply with her brother's challenges. She thrived at Bayfield High School, becoming head girl in 1992 and maintaining a wide circle of friends. David had observed that Arwa was stronger than him in standing up to Robin. In conversations with her friend Charlene Sterling, Arwa would candidly discuss her mother's tendency to hold grudges. Kirsten Koch, Arwa's best friend until 7th form, found Robin quiet and Margaret loud and bossy. The Bain children endured extensive household chores within their unclean and untidy home, a living environment that made other girls reluctant to visit. An incident at Arwa's 16th birthday party illustrated the family's underlying tensions. David became extremely agitated and stormed out after a pass-the-parcel gift was contained in a tampon box. Professionally and academically, Arwa continued to excel. She worked part-time and entered Teachers College in 1993, distinguishing herself particularly in drama and photography. Her success stood in marked contrast to her siblings' struggles. Lanyette's post-Papua New Guinea life proved most challenging. Teacher Joanne Dryden attempted to support her, but Lanyette ultimately left school and home towards the end of 1993, claiming her parents wouldn't sign welfare benefit forms. Friends spoke of persistent problems between Lanyette and Margaret, describing a pattern of rebellion against the family's restrictive religious home culture. Lanyette confided in a friend about feeling a metaphorical wall between herself and her mother. Her personal narratives became increasingly complex and contradictory. To Paul Hewson, a teacher, she told conflicting stories about rape and a potential baby from her time in Papua New Guinea. Leanne Dick, a close friend, recalled Lanyette crying and alleging that Margaret and David were involved in a cult and attempting to eliminate Robin. After an emotional outburst, Lanyette temporarily stayed with another family before definitively leaving school. In November 1993, she rented a room in a Russell Street boarding house, with David and Stephen helping her move. She began working as a sex worker under the name Paige, collaborating with another sex worker named Zara. To Zara, Lanyette made the shocking claim that she had been raped by her father. She also asserted she had given birth to a child, even showing a photograph as evidence. In September 1993, she met Dean Robert Cottle and told him her father had been sexually abusing her for years. By Christmas, Cottle had provided her with a cell phone to support her work. Annette, another boarding house resident who also became a sex worker after Lanyette's death, heard even more distressing details. Lanyette confided that she had been raped and had a baby in Papua New Guinea when she was just 10 years old, suggesting a family friend was responsible. Annette witnessed Lanyette's heavy cannabis use and her despair over Dean Cottle, whom Lanyette claimed was blackmailing her. Another friend observed a significant decline in Lanyette during 1993, noting her peculiar attitude towards David. She would refer to him possessively as "my David" and suggest he was jealous of her relationships. By early 1994, Lanyette appeared agitated and fearful of upsetting David. Stephen's academic journey differed from his siblings. Starting in the bottom stream at Bayfield High School in 1993, he was described by teachers as a live wire and a challenging student. Paul Hewson was impressed by Stephen's spirited nature, but noted his quick temper and tendency to stand up for himself. In May 1993, Stephen and friends were caught committing minor burglaries. During a meeting with Youth Aid Officer John Robinson, Margaret's dominant personality was evident, while Stephen remained notably quiet. This interaction revealed the family's complex interpersonal dynamics. While Stephen's academic performance was modest, Robin's professional life presented a different narrative. At Tyeri Beach School, he was widely regarded as a well-respected principal. Colleague Darlene Thompson saw him as a loving and dedicated man, with the children viewing him almost like a grandfather. Despite never being diagnosed with depression, he struggled with personal care, maintaining poor hygiene and irregular eating habits. He disliked paperwork, but diligently completed it when necessary. Dorothy Duthie, the school board chair, found Robin jovial and witty. Relief teacher Christine Herricks considered him a real gentleman, emphasizing his caring and considerate nature. However, the second half of 1993 presented significant professional challenges, particularly with paperwork related to tomorrow's school's educational reforms. An Education Review Office (ERO) visit in September revealed critical deficiencies in his administrative work. Lesson plans were lacking and record-keeping was substandard. Reviewer Joan Withers found Robin impassive and unemotional, dramatically describing him as a walking cadaver. The ERO report was harshly critical, yet Robin worked methodically to address the identified issues. Dorothy Duthie believed the inspection came at an especially difficult time, with Robin feeling sick and depressed. By early 1994, most of the administrative deficiencies had been corrected. At home, Robin continued to bear familial tensions stoically, confiding in no one, but often telling Thompson that Margaret wasn't well. A school principal who knew the family well provided a nuanced assessment of each family member. Stephen was described as tough, Lanyette as lacking self-esteem, Arwa as fantastic, and the home environment as a mess. David was characterized as having a different grasp on reality but cunning, Margaret as living in fairyland, and Robin as good with children but struggling with administrative tasks. By the start of 1994, the Bain family appeared to be teetering on the edge of a profound crisis. The intricate web of psychological tensions, financial struggles, and deeply dysfunctional family dynamics had reached a breaking point. Each family member was wrestling with personal challenges. David's social awkwardness and failed academic pursuits, Lanyette's traumatic experiences and sex work, Stephen's disciplinary issues, Arwa's determined success, and Robin and Margaret's deteriorating marriage. The accumulated stress, unresolved traumas, and toxic family environment suggested an impending, potentially catastrophic resolution to years of mounting pressure. The seemingly ordinary suburban home on every street concealed a family narrative marked by complexity, pain, and unspoken conflicts that would soon dramatically unfold. Tom Dempsey, alone in the Dunedin St. John ambulance control room during his 14-hour shift, received the call from someone he later described as a young gentleman. The caller wailed, "Help, they're all dead," and repeated the horrifying statement when questioned. He identified his location as 65 Every Street and pleaded for urgent assistance to his family. Dempsey, surprised by the clarity with which the caller provided his name, David Bain, and telephone number despite his distress, alerted the police and dispatched 2 ambulances, instructing his staff not to enter the house. After Dempsey hung up, a signal indicated the caller was still on the line with emergency operator Francis Edwards. Dempsey requested the call be traced, so Edwards remained on the line with David for approximately 25 minutes. David spoke in what seemed like riddles, reiterating his father was dead in the lounge and urging the ambulance to hurry. When Edwards asked about his mother, David wailed louder and stated she, along with his brother and sisters, were also dead. He sounded panicky and repeatedly asked about the ambulance's arrival, speaking very rapidly. When Edwards tried to calm him, David replied with obscenities. Edwards eventually heard police knocking on the door and asking David to open it. The line then went quiet, and around 7:35 a.m., Edwards heard someone say David was going into convulsions.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
At their South Dunedin base, Constables Jeff Wiley and Kim Stevenson had just started their shift when they received a call dispatching them to 65 Every Street. They were given minimal information, only that an entire family was reportedly dead. Skeptical due to previous overblown calls, they arrived to find an ambulance waiting outside the address. Approaching in the dark, they saw a head and shoulders in a front window, the person appearing to be sitting on the floor. Concerned the figure might start shooting, the constables turned off their flashlights, hid behind a flax bush, and watched for 20 seconds. Wheely later remarked to Stevenson that they were fortunate it wasn't David Gray, recalling the 1990 Aramoana massacre. Sergeant Murray Stapp arrived outside the white iron gate of number 65 as the morning remained pitch black. He instructed officers to stop traffic and pedestrians at both ends of the steep street around 7:20 a.m. Meanwhile, Stevenson and Wiley slowly made their way up the path, joined by Stapp and Constable Les Andrew at the porch. The porch was heavily shaded by trees and shrubs. Through a window to the left of the front door, they could see David, still in the position they had observed earlier. The light in his room illuminated the hallway. Stapp stepped back from the front door, his revolver covering the hallway. A key was in the front door, but it would not open. When asked to open the door, David, still hunched down, cried, "No, they are all dead," making no move. He pointed towards the hallway when asked about his father's location. Stapp sent Andrew to retrieve more revolvers and ammunition. Wiley looked through a bay window to the right and saw a rifle on the floor next to an unmoving hand. Andrew quickly returned with the additional firearms and ammunition. Stevenson, unable to open the door with 3 solid kicks, prompted Stapp to break a pane of glass in the door using firewood from a nearby stack. He cleared the glass and reached through to unlock the door from the inside. As the officers entered, they pushed aside fallen spears and curios in the hallway, not noticing the day's newspaper on a cabinet next to a small flashlight. David's dimly lit bedroom, the first on the left, had its door slightly ajar. He was sitting on the floor at the end of his double bed, wailing hysterically, repeating, "They are all dead! They are all dead!" Andrew remained with David, his revolver raised to cover Wiley and Stapp as they proceeded down the hallway. Stevenson asked David how many people lived in the house. David replied 6. Stevenson entered the room opposite David's and found the body of an older man, 58-year-old David Bain, lying partly on his side on the floor. A rifle with a silencer and telescopic sight lay perpendicular to the body. Willie shone his flashlight into the next room on the left and found 18-year-old Laniet Bain under a duvet on a bed against the far wall. To the right, another room had a curtain drawn across the entrance. Stapp pushed it aside with his revolver and saw the body of a woman, 50-year-old Margaret Bain, under her duvet in her waterbed. A dog resembling a Keeshond was to the right of the bed, initially snarling and barking but quickly settling after Stapp spoke to it. David called out, "Casey, Casey." The officers noted a strong, stale smell and a chaotic, dirty environment. In Margaret's room, Stapp saw another doorway covered by a blanket. Between David's and Laniet's rooms was a staircase leading to the lower level. Stapp and Wiley cautiously descended, turning right into the kitchen. Dirty dishes were piled on a red bench, and a large wood-burning stove was visible in the flashlight. Stapp covered Wiley as he moved right again, down a narrow passageway lined with shelves laden with bottled fruit and preserves. He reached another doorway covered by 2 curtains. Shining his flashlight into the room, he found the body of 19-year-old Arwa Bain on her back on the floor, her legs tucked under her, as if she had knelt and fallen backward when shot. As they walked through the kitchen to the washhouse and bathroom, they heard only David wailing upstairs. Stapp and Wiley returned upstairs, Wiley announcing they had found 4 bodies. Stevenson reminded them there should be 6, including David. Retracing their steps in Margaret Bain's room, they found another bedroom behind what they initially thought was a wardrobe. The room was extremely cluttered. On the floor lay the blood-covered body of a boy with scrapes and grazes. 14-year-old David Bain. Wiley concluded a fight had occurred in the room. Meanwhile, Andrew remained at David's doorway, noting a musty, rotting smell. After Stapp announced the discovery of the fifth body, Andrew saw David start shaking and fall backward between the bed and the wall. Andrew was struck by the unchanging nature of David's eyes during this apparent fit. Pulling him out, Andrew placed him in the recovery position. 2 ambulance staff were called in to check David. Ambulance officer Raymond Anderson attended to David, who was still shaking. Anderson noted that David's eyelids flickered when he brushed his eyelashes, a response of a conscious person, leading Anderson to be puzzled by the nature of the shaking, suspecting it might be a purposeful act. David's heart rate was steady, and other vital signs were normal. Wiley guided Chief Ambulance Officer Craig Wumwell through the house to each body, Wumwell noting Robin felt warmer than the others. In David's room, Stapp saw a trigger lock on the floor. Detective Kevin Anderson arrived at 8:11 a.m., but did not enter the house for another 40 minutes. Inside, he observed David, lying on his back, appearing to listen to police radio communications. Anderson examined the front room where Robin lay, noting the scene and a coffee table with a doily at a strange angle. Robin was lying next to a beanbag, with a bullet wound in his left temple. He was heavily clothed and wearing a green woolen hat. Off the front room was a computer alcove, separated by velvet curtains splattered with blood and brain tissue. The rifle stock was partially under one curtain, with a live bullet nearby. The rifle had a live round in the chamber and 2 in its magazine. Another magazine with 3 bullets stood by Robin's right hand. 2 blood streaks ran down his forehead. In the alcove, a lamp was on the floor with a cushion, and scattered papers and computer disks suggested a disturbance. An empty shell casing was near the alcove curtains. Detective Constable Terry Van Turnhout took over watching David around 8:05 a.m., instructed to record anything he said or did. Over the next hour, David tried to get up, saying he had to go to university, and complained of a knife-like headache. Van Turnhout noticed a bruise on David's forehead. David asked for his glasses, saying he couldn't see. Just after 9 a.m., he said, "Black hands are coming to get me," appearing disturbed and distressed. By 10 a.m., David seemed more alert and followed police radio conversations. Ambulance officer John Dick, attending to David from about 7:50 a.m., also heard him whisper, "The black hands are coming," as did ambulance officer Jan Scott.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
David was carried from the house around 10:20 a.m., calmly stating he wanted to go to university. Detective Sergeant Milton Weir, appointed officer in charge of the scene, arrived around 9:45 a.m. He briefly examined the property, noting a caravan with its light and radio on and an old Commer van. The house was dilapidated and cluttered. After midday, Weir toured the house with pathologist Alexander Dempster, who had been waiting outside. Dempster pointed out a computer message. "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." Detectives were assigned to each homicide scene and body, and preliminary searches began. Detective Jennifer Fitzgerald examined Margaret, noting her wounds and clothing. Later searches by Detective Michael Bracegirdle were hampered by clutter. Stephen was found wearing underpants with a blood-stained t-shirt wrapped around his neck, indicating suffocation. Signs of a struggle were evident, with blood everywhere and abrasions on his body. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one through his hand and another to his head. A blood-stained glove, right hand, inside out, was found under his bed, along with another blood-stained glove, left hand, not inside out, under a green school jersey. 2 pieces of skin were found on the floor. Later, a lens from a pair of glasses was found near an ice skate, fitting a frame found in David's room. Laniet was found shot in her left cheek and above her left ear, and also with a head wound. Blood streaked her face, and her hands were smeared with blood. shell casings, and live cartridges were nearby. Arwa was found downstairs, shot in the forehead, her legs tucked under her. 2 bullet holes were in the net curtain of her doorway, indicating shots fired as the assailant approached. A live shell was also found. David's room was relatively neater. His bed had a pastel duvet and sheepskin. A Walkman with a Queen tape lay on the bed. Posters adorned the walls, and a trigger lock with its key was on the floor near live shells and ammunition. His desk contained various items, including a ceramic pot where he later said the trigger lock key was kept. A piece of cardboard with red circles and holes was also present. Downstairs, the washing machine contained washed clothes, including a green jersey with Opera Otago sweatshirt in the basket, which had a blood stain. Blood was also found on the washing powder lid and in the wash basin. A green towel with Robin's blood was hanging nearby. Blood smears, likely from the green jersey, were found on various door jambs and light switches. Luminol testing revealed bloody sock footprints leading from Margaret's room into the hallway and in and out of Laniette's room. No animal paw prints were found. Outside, Robin's van contained a new chainsaw and David's sweatshirt and anorak with gloves, handkerchief, keys, and a whistle. In Robin's caravan, a spent shell and a live shell were found, along with old shells, radios, shavers, and books, including Agatha Christie's Death Comes as the End, a story about a father initially suspected of killing his family. As 1993 drew to a close, Robin Bain sought respite from the tensions at his Dunedin home by spending the Christmas and New Year period in Otaki with his mother Marion. During this time, he visited his sister Colleen and her family in Hamilton, where his occasional sadness went unexplained, though he still maintained his usual demeanor. He spent time with his brothers Michael and Peter, helping to paint their mother's house and enjoying swims at a nearby beach. Michael observed Robin as his considerate self, showing enthusiasm for school projects, including plans for a native bush area and fundraising for a pool cover, as well as his ongoing efforts to involve children with computers through a project called FidoNet. As the holiday concluded, Robin returned to Dunedin, carrying a bag of his mother's preserves and making a poignant remark about going back to a difficult situation. Educational psychologist Cyril Wilden, who had known both Robin and Margaret for many years, saw Robin a few times at the end of 1993 and noted he appeared gaunt and unwell, experiencing what Wilden suspected was reactive depression. Finding it difficult to engage Robin in conversation about the issues he wished to discuss, Wilden was particularly concerned about Robin's physical appearance and the state of the school. When Wilden inquired if Robin was seeking medical help, Robin gave a dismissive affirmative. Throughout the initial months of 1994, Robin continued to reside in his van near Taieri Beach School, but by the end of April, he moved into a house on the school grounds that was previously occupied by a family who left their furniture behind. Robin welcomed this move, appreciating the opportunity to avoid another cold winter in his van. Shortly after settling in, Laniette moved in with him, and within weeks, her 18-year-old friend Kyle Cunningham also joined them, finding Robin to be kindly but somewhat distant. Laniette candidly mentioned to Cunningham that she was engaging in sex work for extra income, while Robin remained busy with school activities, learning the banjo and planning various projects. His letters to his mother during this period were generally positive, though he appeared resigned to the lack of progress in his job applications. Other principals in the area noticed a change in Robin, observing him as unusually dispirited about his stalled career. Malin Brown, the principal of Berwick School who considered Robin a mentor, noted during a joint school camp in April 1994 that Robin seemed preoccupied and unwell. During an educational management course, he displayed uncharacteristic anger regarding the hiring practices of boards of trustees. Kevin McKenzie, the president of the Taieri Principals Association, also found Robin becoming more negative as the year progressed. Robin Davidson, the principal of Brighton School who had taught with Robin decades earlier, noticed a decline in his confidence and appearance, describing him as worn out and unprofessional. At a principals' meeting in May, Robin expressed his frustration at his lack of success in job hunting. Conversely, Darlene Thompson, his colleague at Tyree Beach School, saw no such change, maintaining he remained happy and helpful, even initiating a weekly family maths evening in early June. William Christie, a fellow choir member, spoke with Robin about a potential quartet performance just 2 weeks before the murders and found him to have a positive view of the future. In early June, Darren Palmer, a contractor for Otago Power, encountered Robin at the school, where Robin requested a final meter reading, stating he was moving back into town and appearing quite depressed. Meanwhile, Laniet's life was taking its own complicated path. Living in a boarding house on Russell Street and working as an escort, she confided in a fellow resident about a pimp threatening to expose her to her parents. She revealed her deep-seated fear of her father and made a disturbing disclosure about inappropriate touching. Her financial situation improved in March 1994 when she became eligible for the unemployment benefit, which seemingly prompted her to reduce her sex work. Margaret had earlier written her a letter seeking reconciliation and urging her to return home. In mid-May, Laniet began working at the Rigoletto Coffee House and later at the Otago Museum Cafe, where Arwa also worked. Robin made efforts to create a home for her in Tyree, ensuring the house was warm for her return from work. Arwa's life during this period was marked by her academic and personal pursuits. In her second year at Teachers College, she was studying towards a Bachelor of Education while also working part-time and babysitting. She rekindled her friendship with Kirsten Koch, confiding in her during a visit to Every Street about things she couldn't tell anyone, hinting at a family secret and expressing fear of being overheard. Arwa also mentioned to Koch that David controlled access to the front room and that he had a gun, which made her feel scared. In March, she participated in the Queen o' the Heather competition as part of Dunedin's Scottish Week. David seemed concerned about Arwa's potential departure from home, which would leave only Margaret, Stephen, and himself in the house they planned to replace their dilapidated home. This potentially led to some controlling behavior on his part. Laniet's friend, Leanne Dick, recalled Arwa insisting she accompany her home from the movies because she didn't want to be alone in the car with David, whom Arwa described as manipulative and controlling. David's life in 1994 revolved around part-time studies at the University of Otago, taking papers in literature and music, continuing his singing lessons, and participating in theatrical productions. In February, he resigned from the Royal Dunedin Male Choir. During a production of The Tempest, he befriended Harriet, a fictitious name given by Martin van Bynen in his book Black Hands, an ecology student who played violin in the orchestra. He candidly mentioned that his part-time enrollment was to maintain his unemployment benefit. Their friendship grew as they rehearsed for the Opera Live production of The Gondoliers. David shared his enthusiasm for the plans for the new house, mentioning his own large bedroom with an adjoining bathroom and implying his father had limited involvement. Harriet's interactions with David provided additional insights into his family dynamics. On May 27th, she visited David's home after a function, finding Margaret still awake watching TV. They shared tea in his room, where David showed her a massage table and a book with naked figures, mentioning that he and his mother massaged each other. The next day, he asked Harriet to the theater and for her phone number. On May 29th, they watched Schindler's List, during which David cried, telling her he hadn't cried so much in years. Around the same time, John Muat, a fellow music student, witnessed David behaving erratically during a choral workshop. In early June, David and Harriet attended a ball at Larnac Castle. Afterwards, David expressed a desire for closeness, but wanted to take things slowly. Following an argument with his parents, David visited Harriet, telling her his mother no longer loved his father and wanted him out of the house, also blaming his father for Laniet's departure. Margaret's mental state appeared largely unchanged in 1994, though her sisters perceived an improvement in her relationship with Robin. The housework continued to decline, and with David less present, the house became more chaotic. In late May or early June, Margaret told Cyril Wilden she had abandoned her belief in God and churches, claiming to have found a better way, which she demonstrated by using her pendulum. Progress on the new house seemed to be gaining momentum, with Margaret finishing her plans and preparing to apply for a demolition permit. However, the council insisted on repairs to the spouting following complaints from neighbors. Margaret attempted to negotiate with the council, citing the imminent new build. Stephen appeared to be doing better, playing trumpet in the school jazz orchestra. Margaret contacted John Robinson, the youth aid officer who had previously dealt with Stephen, requesting a follow-up. Laniette also seemed on the verge of addressing her problems. Annette, another pseudonym on the book Black Hands, was her water polo teammate who met her shortly before the shootings and learned that Laniette had given up sex work and planned to reveal her past and the alleged incestuous relationship with her father to her parents that weekend. Laniette seemed both upset and excited, also mentioning that David wanted a family meeting. The days leading up to the shootings were marked by a series of seemingly ordinary yet increasingly tense interactions. On Friday, June 17th, Dean Cottle phoned the Bain home, believing Laniette had returned to every street. Later that day, he saw Laniette in town, where she told him she was making a fresh start and her parents had been questioning her. She did not specifically mention incest. On the same Friday, Laniette interviewed for a telemarketing job and was offered the position, appearing happy about it. David's focus in the lead-up to the shootings seemed primarily centered on his music and his relationship with Harriet. On June 11th, they attended a concert, during which Harriet noticed David looking distant. 6 days before the shootings, David met with Sarah, also a pseudonym on Black Hands, a friend of Harriet's, engaging in a deeply personal conversation about trust, relationships, and his past. He spoke of feeling he had lost everything he loved and his tendency to hurt those he loved. David revealed his inclination to keep his private self hidden and his feeling of having no real friends, occasionally expressing anger towards his father. Their discussion explored the family's dynamics and the plans for the new house as a potential retreat. David shared his concerns that if he moved out, Arwa would leave too, and his mother would sell the property, preventing the new house being built and Laniette's return. He disclosed a personal secret about Laniette seeing black auras and his own experiences of déjà vu or mental absences. He mentioned that Laniette had left home because she defended Robin. Just before leaving, David told Sarah he had a feeling something horrible was going to happen, possibly involving Harriet. Sarah advised him to seek counseling. 5 days before the shootings, David got a tattoo with artist Helen Bennett, who found him easy to get along with. The inking process took about 2.5 hours. The Thursday night before the killings, David spoke with Wallace Chapman, who directed The Tempest, finding him very upbeat. The following afternoon, David returned home to find his parents and siblings in the living room, feeling the usual tension. That evening, he and Harriet went to a Thai restaurant, where he spoke about not feeling connected to his father and recounted a memory from Papua New Guinea involving carrying bags. He felt that during a family outing, his sole purpose was holding his mother's and Stephen's things. Later, David and 2 other singers went to Chapman's flat to record a party CD. Arwa spent the Friday before her death studying with friends for an exam. One of them, Greer Taylor, knew David and found him quirky. Taylor's boyfriend had warned her about David's past rape fantasy.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
After their study session, David picked up Arwa, appearing unfriendly and hustling her away. Later that evening, Arwa met her friend Tim Smith for dinner, talking about problems at home, although not mentioning David or Laniette. She expressed her desire to move out, siding with her mother due to her father's absence and her mother's anger. They discussed flatting, and as they parted, David seemed to be nearby. Arwa had plans to attend a school ball on Saturday night. About a week before the murders, Margaret visited a friend, behaving unusually by drinking black coffee and eating chocolate cake, which were both bad for her migraines. She mentioned picking up Stephen and checking on David, who was hallucinating. Later, Margaret called her friend to express appreciation. On the Friday before the murders, Jeffrey Swift, a family acquaintance from the opera company, dropped off a video. David had just left for university, borrowing money from Margaret for the video. Swift chatted with Margaret, who mentioned David had taken over household responsibilities while Robin was at Taieri Mouth. However, shortly before the shootings, Margaret told her sister that David was taking the parental role too far. Robin spent Friday at school and spoke with educational psychologist Ingrid Dunkley. He also discussed firearms for pest control with his boarder Kyle Cunningham. Before leaving for home on Friday, Robin told Cunningham he would see him on Monday. On Saturday, June 18th, Robin worked on the guttering at every street. Neighbor Wayne Marsh observed Robin, David, and Stephen apparently working together with little communication. Sunday was family outing day, with David and Stephen participating in Dunedin's annual midwinter swim, while Robin drove them and looked after their gear. Harriet and Sarah arrived late. Robin spent the afternoon at a computer genealogy group meeting. After the swim, Sarah dropped David at rehearsals for Oedipus Rex. Classics lecturer Harry Love found David relaxed. After rehearsal, David met Harriet at the museum cafe, where they chatted with Laniet and Arwa, who were working. Several people recalled seeing Laniet that day. At the Playhouse Theater, Laniet told Joanne Dryden she was scared about a family meeting David had called for that night, saying David had threatened to make her go. Marcel Nader Turner also noticed Laniet's agitation and her fear of David. After their cafe shift, David picked up Laniet and Arwa. According to David, they went to Laniet's flat and then to the supermarket. When they returned home, Robin and Margaret were watching television. Laniet and David went to get takeaway food while Arwa went babysitting. According to David, they had their meal and watched a nature video Harriet had lent him. At 8:30 p.m., they switched to Prime Suspect. David said he went to bed before 9 p.m. Later, he heard a car leave. Margaret or Robin went to an ATM to transfer money to their Visa account and withdraw cash around 11:30 p.m. The cash was found on Margaret's dresser the next morning. On the morning of the shootings, at approximately 10:20 a.m., David Bain was carried from his house on a cradle and placed in a waiting ambulance. Accompanying him were Constable Terry Van Turnhout and Detective Sergeant Greg Dunn, who was designated as the officer in charge of witnesses and David's primary police contact. The ambulance transported David to the Dunedin Central Police Station, where he reported a dry throat and a headache. Detective Sergeant Dunn arranged for a hot drink and informed David that a doctor was en route. Dunn inquired if David felt capable of answering some questions about the events that had transpired. David nodded in response, indicating he had lost his voice. He provided Dunn with details regarding family contacts and answered initial questions about the previous night, stating that everyone had been present, including his sister, Laniet, who usually resided at the schoolhouse in Taieri Mouth, but had been home due to working at the cafe. David then asked Dunn to tell him what had happened. Dunn informed him that his mother and father were deceased and promised to provide further information as it became available. Police Dr. Tom Pride arrived around 11 a.m., and David consented to providing blood and body samples as well as undergoing an examination. Before David's clothes and socks were taken for further examination, a police officer brought him a fresh set of clothing obtained from a Red Cross opportunity shop. Detective Sergeant Dunn commenced taking David's formal statement around midday, manually noting down the questions and answers. Their conversation touched upon the layout of the house, and Dunn inquired if David's parents had separated. David responded that they had, explaining that his mother no longer desired the marriage, while his father was unwilling to give up the family, resulting in his father sleeping in the caravan. When asked about his parents' relationship, David described it as unpleasant, deteriorating rapidly about a year after their return, and characterized by tension and constant fault-finding, with his mother feeling she had given everything without reciprocation. David stated that the days leading up to the shootings had been ordinary. When questioned about the previous night, he mentioned a persistent dispute with his father over a chainsaw, which he needed for garden work, asserting that his father had tried to undermine him, reflecting their usual dynamic. David claimed he had gone to bed around 9 p.m. at the same time as Stephen, while his parents and Laniet were still awake watching television, and Arwa was out babysitting. Recounting the morning's events, David described waking around 5:30 a.m., dozing until approximately 5:40 a.m., then getting dressed in his running clothes and new laser running shoes. He mentioned specific clothing items, including socks, bike pants, black rugby shorts, and a t-shirt, also noting a red t-shirt he had put in the wash and a Walkman he carried. He stated he left the house precisely at 5:45 a.m., taking the family dog Casey, and proceeded with his paper run. The interview covered the duration and route of his run, with David recalling specific times with remarkable precision, explaining that he had checked his watch to gauge the run's length, estimating it at about 45 minutes, and noting that he had mostly run, walking only on one particular street. He mentioned being passed by a customer in a red station wagon and that an elderly woman, Elizabeth Mitchell, would have seen and heard him due to her dog barking when he delivered her paper. Describing his return home, David said he removed his shoes in his room and placed his Walkman on the bed without turning on the light. He then went downstairs to the bathroom and put some colored clothing and jerseys in the washing machine. Following this, he washed his hands to remove printer's ink. Upon returning to his room, he turned on the light and noticed his cupboard open, with cartridges and his .22 rifle on the floor. He stated the rifle was his and usually kept locked in the cupboard. David explained that one key for the trigger lock was typically on a necklace he wore, which he hadn't that day, and the other was in a pottery jar on his desk. He recognized the key in the jar had been used because his necklace wasn't with the lock. Seeing the ammunition, David said he felt unsure, confused, and scared, prompting him to investigate. He recounted going to his mother's room, pulling back the curtain, and calling her name. He described her as appearing to have open eyes and a white complexion, then noticing blood all over her head and face. He then ran out, calling for his father, and went to the lounge, finding him gray-white with blood on his temple. It was then that he called the police. David claimed he did not see the rifle beside his father, nor did he enter any other rooms or attempt to wake anyone else. When asked why he looked for his father in the lounge, David said he didn't know, but felt no hesitation in going there. He provided details about the family's usual morning routines, including his father's typical wake-up time on Mondays.
How to have fun anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Detective Sergeant Dunn further inquired about family relationships, specifically Arwa's relationship with their father, which David described as stronger than his own, with Arwa being firmer and less prone to guilt. He mentioned a recent argument he had with his father the previous night, and another argument between his mother and father on Saturday regarding guttering. David described his mother's demeanor the previous night as her usual quietness and ignoring of his father, although she would greet him if spoken to. He believed Laniet had the best relationship with their father among the children, as he would give her money, rides, and take her places, acknowledging Laniet knew about their parents' separation but didn't want it. He noted his father had been living in the caravan for about a year and a half since his mother had asked him to leave the house, and while Stephen knew there was tension, he wouldn't know the full extent of their mother's feelings. David stated his mother wanted Robin completely out of their lives, and that Robin made Stephen feel oppressed. He attributed his parents' estrangement to his father treating his mother as solely a housewife, after taking her to Papua New Guinea as missionaries, preventing her from pursuing her degree and musical talents. When asked about the lump on his head, Dade couldn't recall how he got it, except possibly when he blacked out, and he also didn't know how he had skinned his knee. After reading and making corrections to the notes, David signed each page, adding that the statement was true and correct, and he had nothing further to add. Around 4:40 p.m., police photographed David's injuries. By approximately 5 p.m., the police were finished with David, and his mother's sister Jan and her husband Bob were waiting to take him to their home in St. Clair. Jan was deeply upset, but tried to remain strong for David, who broke down and clung to her. She assured him they would provide a home, care, and love for him. At their home, David ate soup and muffins, watched television, and had a spa bath. They were soon visited by Marjorie McCormick from Victim Support, who found David withdrawn and expressionless, cuddling a cushion. Jan Clark was emotional, holding and comforting David, who mostly sat quietly, responding briefly if asked something, though Jan did see occasional tears. David was given Heidi's room upstairs. Jan was surprised by his lack of overt emotion and the absence of questions like, "How could this happen?" or "Why did it happen?" Bob Clark felt David relaxed quickly once at their home. The next morning, Jan found David rubbing his arm and noticed his new tattoo, which he said he got when his dog Sasha died, explaining it was for all the pets he had lost. He became tense and spoke haltingly about the death of loved ones, vowing never to love again. He also commented on Stephen's potential strength. Later that morning, David discussed funeral arrangements with Jan, having clear ideas for a family service with cremation for his parents and burial for his siblings, involving the Quakers and specific music for each. The following Monday, Robin's colleague Darlene Thompson received news of his death around 10 a.m. The school closed, and parents gathered expressing disbelief and shock. Other principals, Mullen Stone and Kevin McKenzie, went to help at the school, noticing disarray and lack of planning. Psychologist Cyril Wilden provided grief counseling. Wilden found a disturbing school newsletter containing violent stories written by pupils, which shocked McKenzie. Thompson was less concerned, attributing it to the children's backgrounds. On Tuesday, Marjorie McCormick sat with David, who mentioned needing health foods and getting his dog. He remained calm and unemotional, describing his family as almost perfect and feeling no attachment to his father. When asked what was important, he replied, "I need to know who did it." McCormick was surprised by his detailed and unemotional funeral plans, all starting with, "I want this, I want that." According to the book Black Hands, she said, "He was very clear and detailed, and it went on till I asked him, 'When did you have time to think about all this?' He said he had thought about the funeral during the night as he hadn't slept. It all seemed very cold and clinical." He specified tributes and music, including Foray's Requiem for Margaret, Queen's Who Wants to Live Forever for Laniet, and detailed clothing for each. Funeral director Derek Hope also visited David, finding him zombie-like and emotionless. Margaret's sister Valerie Boyd and her husband John arrived at the Clark house on Tuesday, finding David lying on the floor and showing little emotion. Greg Dunn arrived later to take another statement, focusing on household income, and again questioning why David hadn't opened the door for the police, to which David replied his fear was too great. The subject of the trigger lock key arose again, and David reiterated his earlier account. He said he had last used the rifle months prior. Dunn revisited David's movements after his paper round, and David changed his account of washing his hands, now saying it was before handling the laundry. He recounted finding his mother, noting her pallor and the blood, and his subsequent search for his father in the lounge. He denied seeing or touching the rifle and not entering his siblings' rooms. Dunn pressed him on the 25-minute delay in calling the ambulance, which David couldn't explain, mentioning recent spacing out episodes. Dunn concluded by questioning why David had initially said the whole family was dead. David claimed he didn't know and then signed his statement after making changes. Later, David enjoyed attention from a friend of Jan's daughter and told jokes about his girlfriend. In the evening, he he insisted on seeing the day's newspaper with the headline about the family's slaying, becoming distressed after reading it. Bob Clark tried to comfort him, recounting what he had seen at the morgue. David then entered a trance-like state, repeatedly saying, "Black hands." Jan and Val tried to comfort him, and David said, "They lied to me. They weren't asleep. They knew what happened," before again saying, "Black hands," and mentioning death and dying all around, referencing Schindler's List. When Jan asked if he had seen them dying, he opened his eyes and said no. He had only seen his mother and father, who were already dead. Jan suggested he talk to Greg Dunn. Dunn arrived later that evening and spoke with David, who was crying and talking about black hands coming to get them and his regret at not running home faster. They discussed 3 possibilities for the murders: an unconnected person, David, or his father, to which David replied, "If it was Dad, I would be very disappointed." His friend Harriet visited, finding him upset because he hadn't been told 2 of his siblings were out of bed, and mentioning a period of memory loss and his fear of being accused. He also expressed sadness about Stephen's fight and mentioned injuries he couldn't recall getting. He repeated the phrase, "Everything I have ever loved, I have lost."
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
On Wednesday morning, David woke Val and John Boyd, mentioning his father and wishing he was dead. He used the word "if" when talking about his father, citing the black hands idea. Funeral arrangements were again discussed, with David insistent on cremation for his parents and burial for his siblings together, wanting to join Laniette in her grave and suggesting singing solo. Presbyterian minister Ian Cairns spoke with David about his beliefs on life after death, which Jan found incredibly articulate. Marjorie McCormick found the household tense, with David having taken over all funeral arrangements. Together they compiled a detailed list, with David specifying clothing for each family member, including his own red patchwork jersey. Harriet and Sarah visited that evening, and during a walk, David had a dramatic outburst of screaming, followed by Sarah asking if the shootings were the horrible thing he had foreseen. He confirmed it was and spoke about being angry with his father if he was responsible, worried about the police believing his innocence. Back at the Clarks, Val Boyd observed David being comforted by Sarah while Harriet was upset he wouldn't talk to her. David discussed his déjà vu experiences and his inability to recall 20 minutes. He also mentioned scratches on his chest he couldn't remember getting. Later that night, David chatted with Val for 5 hours, expressing hatred for his father, distress about Stephen and Laniette, and his father's perceived dominance and failure to provide for their future. As the funeral approached, Sarah spoke to David again, and he mentioned selling the property and asking for repayment of loans. David's friend Rupert brought over CDs for the funeral, and Jan noted the amount of laughter. Jan and Val found the song David chose for Laniette disturbing. David showed no emotion when discussing the funeral and wanted no one to wear black. He initially rejected walking with Margaret's frail mother, but was eventually persuaded. He had plans for Arwa's birthday the day after the funeral, wanting to have her friends over. Jan felt David showed an incredible calmness and detachment, leading to increasing anxiety about his involvement. Val Boyd also noted David's ability to shut off emotionally and his control over the situation. Harriet visited again, and Val heard laughter upstairs. Jan spoke to David about his lack of consideration and felt manipulated. His aunts noticed his healthy appetite. McCormick also found his reaction surprising, noting no signs of grief. The trajectory of the investigation began to shift as forensic evidence started to emerge. Bruises and an abrasion were noted on David's body during a medical examination on the morning of the murders, injuries he could not readily explain. These injuries took on greater significance in light of the violent struggle indicated in Stephen's room, suggesting the killer might have sustained injuries. Furthermore, traces of Stephen's blood were found on David's clothing, including his t-shirt, shorts, and socks, raising questions about how this occurred if David's initial account of his movements was accurate. A crucial piece of evidence was the discovery of a lens from a pair of glasses in Stephen's room. This lens was found to fit a damaged frame of Margaret Bain's spectacles located on a chair in David's bedroom. David admitted to sometimes wearing his mother's glasses, especially after his own pair had been broken shortly before the murders. The presence of the lens in the room where a violent struggle had taken place strongly suggested David was wearing the glasses at the time and lost the lens during the fight. Perhaps the most compelling physical link to David was the discovery of his fingerprints in blood on the stock of the .22 rifle, believed to be the murder weapon. While David acknowledged owning the rifle, he denied touching it after returning from his paper run. The clarity and definition of the prints, according to fingerprint experts, suggested they were of recent origin, and the fact they were seemingly made with blood that covered the rest of the rifle raised serious questions. Investigators struggled to reconcile how David's unsmeared fingerprints could be present on a rifle otherwise covered in blood if he had only handled it during a previous rabbit or possum shooting. Coupled with this physical evidence was the lack of any direct forensic evidence unequivocally linking Robin Bain to the actual shootings. While there were small smears of blood on his hands, these could be attributed to spatter from his own head wound. No fingerprints belonging to Robin were found on the rifle. The absence of a clear motive for Robin to murder his entire family, save for David, also fueled the growing suspicion towards the surviving son. As investigators pieced together these elements, a picture began to form suggesting David's involvement in the killings was more than that of a grieving survivor. Witness statements regarding tensions within the family and David's sometimes controlling behavior further contributed to this conclusion. By Friday, 24th of June 1994, just 4 days after the murders, investigators believed they had gathered sufficient evidence to arrest David Cullen Bain and charge him with the murders of his parents and 3 siblings.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
David Cullen Bain was formally charged with the murders at 1:46 p.m. on Friday, June 24th, 1994, responding, "No, I'm not guilty." He refused further medical examination. Police informed Jan Clark of the arrest as she was leaving for a pre-funeral meeting. The family was traumatized. David was remanded in custody and did not attend the funeral. The funeral proceeded largely according to David's plans, with specific music for each family member. The Tyree Beach School held its own memorial. The Bain family members were buried together in one grave. On David's first day in prison, Corrections Officer Graham Stanley, whose son Shane was David's friend, became emotional and was sent home. He cautioned David, who seemed to adapt easily to prison life. Stanley stopped David from faking fits. David's uncles visited him to discuss the house, and Michael Bain asked if he had done it, to which David replied he had told his side to the police and would stick to that. The jury trial of David Bain commenced in the imposing Edwardian Courthouse in Dunedin on the 8th of May, 1995. A panel of 7 men and 5 women were sworn in, marking the beginning of a legal battle that captivated the nation. The Crown Prosecutor, Bill Wright, delivered his opening address until just after 3 in the afternoon, laying out the case against the accused. Throughout this initial stage, David Bain remained a seemingly quiet figure, often looking down at the desk in front of him. Despite the gravity of the charges, his defense team conveyed an air of optimism regarding his prospects. Bain appeared in court wearing gold-rimmed glasses, jeans, and a patterned jersey that had been provided by the wife of his lawyer, Michael Guest. Observers noted a change in his physical appearance, as he had gained weight attributed to prison food, treats from supporters, and a lack of his previous running routine. Author James McNeish, present in the courtroom, remarked on Bain's long hands, which were seldom at rest. Over the subsequent 2 weeks, approximately 80 witnesses presented evidence on behalf of the Crown. The prosecution's case was meticulously structured, commencing with the testimonies of the police and ambulance officers, who were first on the scene at every street, and culminating with the detailed accounts of police interviews conducted with David Bain. In his opening statement, Prosecutor Bill Wright outlined what he termed the 3 fundamental pillars of the Crown's case against David Bain. The first of these pillars was the body of evidence that directly connected David Bain to the fatal shootings. The second pillar focused on the relative absence of evidence that implicated his father, Robin Bain, in the crimes. Finally, the third element of the Crown's argument was the evidence suggesting that Robin Bain had not died by suicide. Wright further presented the Crown's theory regarding the sequence of events. According to this reconstruction, David Bain had shot his mother and 3 siblings in the early hours of the morning, between 4 and 5 o'clock, before he embarked on his regular newspaper delivery route. Upon his return to the house, the Crown contended David had concealed himself in the computer alcove, a small area adjacent to the lounge that was separated by green curtains. The prosecution theorized that when Robin Bain entered the lounge to engage in his customary morning prayers or meditation, David had then extended the rifle through a small opening in the curtains and fatally shot his father. Wright acknowledged that the Crown could not definitively state the precise unfolding of events, but asserted that this proposed scenario was, in their view, more probable than any other. The 24th of May saw the appearance of the first witness for the defense, and notably, only one of just 3 such witnesses to be called. This witness was David Bain himself, who delivered his testimony in a fluent, polite, detached manner, his voice described as a bass. Some observers noted his demeanor as somewhat flat and stiff. However, the intense public and media interest in his account was evident by the fact that the upstairs public gallery of the courtroom was opened, and every available seat was occupied. A line of individuals formed outside the courtroom, hoping for an opportunity to witness his testimony. Michael Guest, leading the defense, guided David Bain through his evidence, beginning with questions about his relationships with each member of his family. Bain described his relationship with his mother as wonderful, stating that they had gotten on excellently since their time in Papua New Guinea, where she had homeschooled him and later supported his musical endeavors. He acknowledged some of her beliefs as a bit odd from an outside perspective, but maintained that this did not affect their bond. Regarding his father, Bain spoke of a great relationship, the old father-son relationship that we had, recounting fishing and tramping trips and learning to shoot from his father. He addressed comments attributed to him after the murders about hating his father, stating that he could not clearly recall making such statements, but that if he had, they would have been intended to express anger if his father had been responsible for the deaths. He denied ever telling his father to leave the family home, stating that his mother had never requested him to do so. Bain characterized his father as a very stoic person who kept his feelings to himself, making it rare for him to know his father's true emotions. He described a good friendship with his younger brother Stephen, who he said looked up to him, and recounted taking him tramping and enjoying music and remote-controlled car races together in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Bain also described his relationship with Laniet as loving and caring, sharing similar interests in bikes. He portrayed his relationship with Arwa as growing into a close friendship, spending time together at university, sharing lunch, and discussing friendships on a regular basis. The defense then moved to address some of the hard evidence presented by the Crown. Regarding the glasses found on a chair in his bedroom, Bain stated that they were his mother's, that they would help his vision, but were a strain to wear, and that he had not worn them for at least a year. having no idea how they came to be in his room. Asked about the green jersey he had initially identified as Arwa's, Bain clarified that it actually belonged to his father, although Arwa would sometimes wear it around the house. He stated that his father had worn the jersey on the Saturday afternoon before the shootings and a tracksuit on Sunday. Bain then offered startling new information about the night before the murders, stating that he could recall waking up during the evening and hearing raised voices emanating from the living room. He emphasized that his room was usually soundproof to the television and that he could not discern the content of the voices, only that they were raised. He also provided a much fuller account of his actions upon returning from his paper round. He now recalled going into Stephen's room, seeing him covered in blood, touching his shoulder to try and wake him, and then leaving the room. He claimed to remember being in Lanyette's room, hearing her gurgling, seeing blood, and going right up beside the bed before leaving. His recollection continued with being downstairs in Arwa's room, seeing her on the floor and appearing dead, and then going into the lounge and seeing his father, noting a wound on his head but not seeing the rifle. He unequivocally stated that he had not killed any of his family members. Bain explained that he had provided a different version to the detectives initially because he had not yet remembered these events. He attributed the return of these memories, which helped to account for the 20 to 25-minute gap before his 911 call and his initial statement that the whole family was dead, to sessions he had had with psychiatrist Professor Paul Mullen in December 1994. Asked to explain the déjà vu experience at the Sinfonia concert with Harriet, Bain described it as simply daydreaming because he found the piece boring. He denied telling Harriet's friend Sarah that he had a premonition of something horrible happening, stating that they had discussed the concept of premonition but not his own experiences, and that a comment attributed to him about something horrible happening to Harriet had been taken out of a larger conversation about her other relationship. Bain also attempted to explain his use of the term black hands, stating that his first recollection of the feeling came on the Tuesday night after the shootings, and that it was the closest analogy he could find to describe the fear and the image of his family being surrounded and taken away. Regarding the night of his arrest, Bain stated that he had terminated the police interview and sought legal advice because the detectives did not seem to be listening to his explanations and were only considering one possibility. He finished giving his evidence at 2:30 in the afternoon, having been on the stand for approximately 3 hours.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time. Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Crown Prosecutor Bill Wright then began his cross-examination of David Bain. Bain told Wright that he still had gaps in his memory of the time after entering his mother's room, but that his recollection was complete up until that point. Wright pressed him further on the black hands, asking if they were physically taking his family away, to which Bain replied that it was more like they were covering them as his family moved away from him. Regarding the trance-like states, Bain described them as simply being away with the fairies or daydreaming. He clarified that slipping in and slipping out was like briefly losing focus and then returning to reality. He acknowledged an increase in déjà vu in the week prior to the murders, occurring about every second day, but stated it was not abnormal for him. Bain maintained that his relationship with his father was close and loving, although he conceded that he might have told Val Boyd that he hated his father and considered him sneaky, explaining this as anger if his father was responsible and referring to feelings of guilt his father could evoke. He described his father as trying to reassert his authority within the family due to the separation from his mother, which Bain did not resent. He admitted telling Harriet that he hadn't felt his father was his father, attributing it to anger after an argument. Regarding the new house, Bain described it as a sanctuary or retreat, meant to recreate the natural environment of Papua New Guinea and provide peace from the outside world. He expressed concern that the house would not be built if he left every street, as his sister Arwa might also leave, leaving only his mother and Stephen. He denied concern that Arwa might flat and his mother might buy a unit. Bain stated that Arwa was just as involved in the house plans as he was. He reiterated that he had no explanation for the glasses and lens or his fingerprints on the rifle, speculating that he must have picked up the rifle at some stage without remembering. He could not account for the injuries to his face and knee or the blood on the light switch in his room. He said he must have touched blood for his palm print on the washing machine and blood in the bathroom, stating he washed his hands before doing the wash and did not see blood spots in the basin, also confirming he did not turn on the light in his bedroom. Asked about the raised voices on Sunday night, Bain initially said he had not remembered them, but later recalled hearing them about 2 or 3 months after the murders. Cross-examination concluded with Bain outlining how a misfed bullet could be cleared from the rifle. Following his testimony, David Bain returned to his place between prison guards, reportedly convinced that his evidence had gone well and that the jury would find him not guilty. The next defense witness was psychiatrist Paul Mullen, a professor of psychological medicine in Dunedin until 1992, and subsequently a professor of forensic psychiatry at Monash University in Melbourne. Mullen testified that the déjà vu experiences described by Bain were common and that his trance-like states were akin to daydreaming. He suggested that Bain's initial memory loss could be attributed to dissociative amnesia, a condition where the brain blocks out traumatic memories, resulting in incomplete recall. Mullen conceded under cross-examination that memory loss could be feigned and recovered memories could be self-serving. The final witness called by the defense was Kyle Cunningham, Robin Bain's boarder. The defense had also subpoenaed Dean Cottle, Lanyette's associate, but he proved difficult to locate. Despite the efforts of a private investigator, Cottle only appeared voluntarily at the High Court on the 26th of May after the Crown had concluded its closing address. Justice Neil Williamson permitted Cottle to give evidence, but only to the judge, not the jury. Cottle claimed he was unaware of the subpoena and felt confused and incapable of providing coherent testimony. He denied meeting the private investigator. The judge ultimately concluded that Cottle's hearsay evidence would be unsafe and unreliable and refused to allow him to testify before the jury, a significant setback for the defense, which had hoped to introduce Lanyette's allegations of incest through him. David Bain, remaining confident in his acquittal, had kept a diary while on remand in prison. This diary, according to one individual who read it closely, revealed no confessions or deep insights, but rather a remarkable detachment from the evidence against him, focusing instead on visitors and his personal stress, and expressing feelings of betrayal by his family. The jury retired to deliberate just before midday on Monday, the 29th of May. After returning from dinner and a further short period of deliberation that evening, the jury forewoman announced the verdicts. 5 times she uttered the word, "guilty." Standing in the dock, David Bain swayed and then collapsed. Prison guard Grant Derns carried the seemingly unconscious Bain out of the courtroom and to his cell. David Bain was sentenced to 16 years in jail without parole and began his term at Paparua Prison near Christchurch, a challenging environment where he encountered members of various gangs. Meanwhile, a legal battle ensued, with his lawyer, Michael Guest, appealing to the Court of Appeal, arguing that the exclusion of certain evidence had denied Bain a fair trial. This appeal was ultimately dismissed. Preparations then commenced for an appeal to the Privy Council in London, a final legal avenue funded by former All Blacks rugby player and businessman Joe Karam, who became a determined advocate for Bain's innocence. Karam's involvement stemmed from his belief in Bain's lack of motive and the conviction that a grave injustice had occurred. Despite Karam's efforts, the Privy Council initially rejected the application for leave to appeal. Karam's dedication led to the publication of his book, which spurred a joint investigation into the police inquiry, though it ultimately rejected Karam's claims of incompetence and unfairness. Bain's legal team, now led by Colin Withnall QC, applied for the royal prerogative of mercy. After several legal steps, the Court of Appeal reconsidered the case but dismissed the appeal. The fight continued, leading to a full hearing at the Privy Council in December 2008, by which time New Zealand's Supreme Court had become the final court of appeal. But Bain's case still fell under the old regime. In a significant development in May 2007, the Privy Council declared that a substantial miscarriage of justice had occurred, quashing Bain's convictions and ordering a retrial. The decision of whether to hold a new trial was left to the Crown. Bain was subsequently released on bail by the High Court in Christchurch, to a jubilant reception from supporters. A month later, the Solicitor General announced that Bain would indeed be retried. The second trial, before Justice Graham Pankhurst, began in March 2009. The defense adopted an aggressive strategy, challenging virtually every aspect of the Crown's case. Pre-trial, the defense fought to prevent the retrial and exclude key Crown evidence, including Bain's testimony from the first trial and evidence regarding alleged rape fantasies. While they failed to exclude the former, they succeeded in the latter. One crucial piece of evidence concerned the emergency call Bain made. The Crown intended to present newly surfaced evidence, suggesting Bain had whispered, "I shot the prick," or "I shot that prick," during the call. This alleged utterance was supposedly detected on a tape using advanced audio equipment. However, despite analysis by experts for both sides in the United Kingdom, none could definitively identify the sounds as those specific words, leading the Supreme Court to rule the evidence inadmissible due to its uncertainty and lack of definitive probative value. Throughout the retrial, the defense aimed to highlight alleged flaws and mistakes in the original investigation to establish reasonable doubt. The defense also sought to portray themselves as the underdog against the might of the police and the Crown. The prosecution's challenge remained the establishment of a clear motive for David Bain, given his apparent demeanor and lack of prior violent behavior. The defense countered by suggesting Robin Bain was in a state of mind more conducive to such violence, potentially triggered by the imminent exposure of alleged incest. Justice Pankhurst's summing up was noted for its fairness, although he indirectly pointed to the presence of the day's newspaper in the hallway as a strong point for the Crown, suggesting Robin was following his normal routine and unaware of impending events. After around 5 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict: not guilty on all 5 counts of murder. The courtroom erupted in celebration as David Bain was freed. Following the acquittal, the focus shifted to the issue of compensation for Bain's 13 years of imprisonment. Bain's lawyers lodged a claim for wrongful conviction and imprisonment in March 2010. The Minister of Justice instructed retired Justice Ian Binney of the Supreme Court of Canada to advise on whether Bain was innocent on the balance of probabilities. Justice Binney's report, delivered in August 2012, concluded that while Bain had not proven his innocence beyond a reasonable doubt, he had met the standard of innocence on the balance of probabilities. Binney cited egregious errors by the Dunedin police as extraordinary circumstances justifying compensation. He found the Crown's theory of the murders inherently implausible and questioned David Bain's motive. However, he found the bloody footprints in the house were more likely Robin's than David's. The police were critical of Binney's report, pointing to factual errors and alleging he gave undue weight to David Bain's evidence. The Minister of Justice also sought a peer review from former High Court Judge Dr. Robert Fisher, who delivered a highly critical assessment of Binney's report, deeming it unsafe to rely on due to its methodology and over-reliance on David Bain's statements without sufficient corroboration. Justice Binney defended his report, arguing that Fisher had misconstrued his approach and that he had been thorough in his consideration of the evidence. The Bain camp initiated legal proceedings to challenge the handling of Binney's report. However, a settlement was reached with a new Justice Minister, Amy Adams, who ordered a fresh compensation inquiry. Retired Australian High Court Judge Ian Callanan was appointed to conduct this new inquiry in March 2015. His report, delivered in January 2016, acknowledged the complexity of the case, but concluded that David Bain had not proven on the balance of probabilities that he did not kill his family. Callanan treated the inquiry like a civil case, placing the onus on Bain to demonstrate his innocence. He gave little weight to hearsay evidence regarding incest, but noted David Bain's expressed animosity towards his father as a possible motive. Ultimately, in August 2016, the government announced an ex gratia payment of $925,000 to David Bain, acknowledging the time and expenses incurred in his compensation claim and aiming to avoid further litigation. This payment was not an admission of wrongful conviction, and the Bain team agreed not to seek any further funds.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
The central, crucial question remains: who killed the Bain family, David Bain or his father, Robin Bain? These are presented as the only two possibilities, as no evidence suggests the involvement of a third party. Martin van Bynen, the author of the book Black Hands, which heavily informs this episode, asserts his view that David Bain is the killer. And to understand this conclusion, the author suggests starting with the violent struggle that occurred in Stephen Bain's room. The author posits that regardless of who the killer was, the initial plan likely involved killing the family while they slept, a method deemed the most painless and clinical. This approach would have minimized resistance or attempts to flee. However, this plan went awry when Stephen woke and fought for his life in a desperate and prolonged struggle. The ferocity of this fight left Stephen with numerous injuries, including bruises, scrapes, cuts, and impressions of drawer handles on his back, along with blood from a superficial head wound and a gunshot wound to his hand scattered throughout the room. Crucially, the author highlights the comparison between the injuries sustained by Robin and David. According to the author, only David exhibited injuries and scratches consistent with a vigorous fight, including at least 3 bruises on the right side of his head and a graze on his knee that bore a striking resemblance to abrasions on Stephen's body. The author considers the scratches or marks on David's chest, seen by 2 witnesses, as almost conclusive evidence of David's guilt, suggesting that the police doctor might have missed them, or that David concealed them during the examination. In contrast, Robin had no fresh injuries other than the fatal gunshot wound, and the minor nicks on his hands could be attributed to routine tasks. The presence of Stephen's blood on David's shirt, shorts, and socks is another key piece of evidence cited by the author. While acknowledging that some blood transfer could have occurred from contact with surfaces, the location of blood, particularly on David's shorts, raises questions. Robin's clothing was also blood-stained, but the blood was solely his own, implying that if he were the killer, he would have had to change his clothes and socks before his death and place the bloodied garments in the laundry. The author finds it peculiar that Robin would clean up and change clothes, yet leave traces of his family's blood on his hands, especially since no blood was found on the lounge door handle or the computer he supposedly used. The discovery of Margaret's broken glasses in David's room, with one lens dislodged and found in Stephen's room, is presented as further compelling evidence. The glasses were useful to David, who could not explain their presence or the separated lens. The author suggests this scenario aligns perfectly with the fight in Stephen's room, inferring that the glasses were likely damaged during the struggle. Furthermore, David's fingerprints were found in blood on the rifle's stock. While David claimed he did not touch the rifle after returning from his paper round, the author questions how the prints could have remained so clear, without smearing, if blood had gotten on his fingers from elsewhere. The author also finds it unlikely that old, dried blood prints from a previous rabbit shooting trip would have survived the handling of the rifle during the 5 killings and the fight with Stephen. The author also analyzes David's account of hearing Laniette gurgling. While acknowledging the possibility of post-mortem sounds, the author finds it more likely that Laniette was still alive after being shot in the cheek, and that David heard her struggling to breathe. This, according to the author, leads to the conclusion that David must have fired the subsequent fatal shots. In contrast to the evidence against David, the author argues that Robin did not leave a single clear clue implicating him as the killer. The author revisits the sock print evidence, heavily relied upon by Justice Binney, and finds the methodology of the experiments flawed and not truly representative of the conditions in the Bain house. The author also points out numerous implausible actions Robin would have had to take if he were the killer, such as neatly replacing a lid on a jar containing a key, wearing David's gloves, escaping a violent fight with minimal injuries, closing a curtain after passing through, cleaning up and changing clothes while David was due home imminently, leaving a puzzling computer message, and shooting himself in an unusual manner. The lack of Robin's fingerprints or blood on the rifle is also noted. Ultimately, Van Bainen concludes that the weight of the evidence, particularly David's injuries, the blood on his clothes, the lens connecting him to the fight, his fingerprints on the rifle in blood, and the likely scenario surrounding Laniette's gurgling, strongly suggests David's guilt. The author believes that David's account is often inconsistent and unreliable, potentially masking the truth of his involvement in the murders. While acknowledging the lack of a definitively proven motive, the author speculates that David's actions may have stemmed from resentment, a desire for control, or a reaction to perceived failures in his life. Despite the author's conviction of David's guilt, they express no desire to see him imprisoned again, given the time he has already served. The author's final assertion is that the New Zealand public has every reason to doubt David's innocence, and that despite his continued denials, the truth, in the author's view, is that David Bain murdered his family. By this time of his ex gratia payment in 2016, Bain, who had spent approximately 13 years in prison before his acquittal, had already begun the process of rebuilding his life away from the intense public gaze that had followed him for over 2 decades. As noted in the 2013 publication Black Hands, David Bain, then 48 years old, he was living near Hamilton with his wife Liz Davies, the daughter of his longtime supporter Carolyn. Liz was working as a primary school teacher, and David was reportedly a stay-at-home father. More recent information from a March 2025 Otago Daily Times article, marking the 30th anniversary of the murders, indicates that David Bain now goes by the name William Davies. Attempts to reach him for comment were unsuccessful, suggesting he continues to maintain a low profile and avoid public attention. Friends of his, including his steadfast advocate Joe Karam, reported that the 52-year-old was keen to leave the traumatic chapter of his life behind him. The article also mentioned that he reportedly resides in Cambridge, a town in the Waikato region. The information available suggests that since the ex gratia payment, David Bain has focused on living a private life with his family in the Waikato region of New Zealand. He has taken steps to distance himself from his former identity and the notoriety associated with the Bain family murder case. His reported desire to leave the past behind indicates a continued effort to find normalcy and peace after decades of intense public and legal scrutiny. The absence of recent public statements or appearances underscores his commitment to maintaining this private existence. Hey there! I just wanted to say thank you for the latest episode. I had heard of the Shanda Sharer case before, but the way you told it really hit different. You struck a perfect balance between sensitivity and detail, and I was totally hooked from start to finish. Honestly, I had to pause a few times. Some parts were just so heavy. But I appreciate that you didn't shy away from how brutal the case was, while still being respectful to Shanda's memory. It's wild how young all the girls were, especially Melinda. Like middle school drama turning into murder, unreal. What really got me was the part where Shanda called out for her mom during the torture. That detail completely broke me. I don't know how you managed to narrate that with so much care, but it really stayed with me. Please keep doing what you're doing. Your storytelling is amazing, and I love how you handle tough topics with empathy and respect. Can't wait for the next episode. Emily Saunders, Portland, Oregon. Hey, just listened to the Shanda Sharer episode, and I gotta say, I thought I knew the case pretty well, but you brought out some stuff I hadn't heard before, especially around the group dynamic between the girls. You really made me feel how chaotic and manipulative it all was. One small thing I noticed you didn't mention, and no shade at all, the episode was awesome. During Melinda's trial, I think they brought up that she'd been sexually abused by her cousin when she was younger. Not saying that excuses anything, obviously, but it adds a layer to how messed up her background was, and maybe why she latched onto Amanda so hard. Anyway, I've been binging your show for a while, and this episode was one of your best. Keep it up. Your storytelling style and pacing are top tier. Jake Martinez, San Antonio, Texas.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.